From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Why are you a conspiracy theorist? And I said, why isn't everybody a goddamn conspiracy theorist?
This is the real research. Literally have an alien base, and they are literally communicating.
I don't have a whole lot of time.
Have you personally had any experience with interdimensional beings?
What we're thinking of as aliens, they have infiltrated a lot of aspects of military intelligence. And they are not what they claim to be.
We leave you much that is undone.
That's one small step for man.
There are great ideas undiscovered.
Visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars.
Remove one of truth's protective layers.
There's a monolith.
They want those major population centers wiped out.
Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
One giant leap for mankind.
Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened.
Those challenges are yours.
We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
There are places to go beyond belief. Beyond belief.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Conspiracy Podcast. We don't take days off because reptilians don't take days off. And today we're joined by Tony Arterburn, founder of Wise Wolf Gold. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Tony.
Well, it's an honor. Thanks for having me. I love the intro. It's all my favorites. All the greatest hits.
It's the greatest hits
of the conspiracy. Cabal. You've got everything right there in one 60-second intro. Love it.
You've kind of got as a because me and Lee, we're not financially minded, so you know, but I'm interested in the conspiracy of the world and money, you know, because they say the money makes the world go round, but then they also say some say the world is not round. So
I like that. Yeah, well, at the root of everything is the money. I mean, you hear that term, follow the money, and that's generally true. And what my research, I kept going back to the origin story. I felt like something was missing. When you read court historians, when you read regular history, if you're really paying attention and you absorb it, whether it's a biography or a narrative history, what you find is there's something nagging in the back of your mind saying, I don't understand the connective tissue here between event to event. And what my research showed me was that if you overlay the conspiracy theory of history with finance into our modern world, into what's happening, our reality, what you find is that the origin is finance. And whether you're talking about the oligarchs funding communism, which is again like a construct. I talk about this all the time. I mean, Marxism is basically Satanism in the operating form in the material world, and who's financed that? It has to have financing. That's the thing that, a couple of years ago on Fox News, Newt Gingrich brought up Soros. And they shut him down. Like, you don't need to talk about who funds the politics, just talk about the politics. And that's the issue. Like, we don't talk about who funds the puppet. We only talk about the puppet. And if we get really into the weeds and you look at the way the world's run, you have to go into the origin of the finance. And that is the history of fiat currency, the history of central banking, who wanted a central bank, and then who finances these so-called organic political movements that define our times and define our politics and our world. And so when you start unpacking that and you find, my friend Sam Tripoli, who does Tinfoil Hat, calls them bankers' wars, you'll find that they finance both sides, things of that nature. It is an interesting story because it really permeates all throughout history. from a religious standpoint, it's one of the reasons why, the story of Jesus in the temple, when he throws out the money changers and he takes a whip out and he, flips the tables and shows wrath, is because he's trying to communicate, in my opinion, where to look for the evil. Doesn't mean that people that I deal in money and I deal in gold and silver and Bitcoin and other things, but I'm not in love with it, and I certainly wouldn't sell my soul for it, and I'm not trying to hurt other people to accumulate it. So the money in itself is not evil. Accumulating money is not evil, or making money or spending money is not evil. But the things that people will do to obtain it, especially those in the upper level of the ruling class and the overlords, I mean, I think they've done some really heinous, evil things. And I think they're saddled with that on a spiritual level, which we can get into. I think they're, you can look at them, the deadness in the eyes. They don't look very creative to me. They look like they're kind of stuck in a material prison. but they do.
Like NPCs almost, non-playable characters.
Very close to it. Yeah, and they hate us for our creativity. I mean, it's there's something about the deal that they've struck or whatever that they have to be able to accumulate and amass so much power and wealth, that I think that there's something defective in them. But again, that's the things that I study. That's my wheelhouse, because I think right now we're inside of the tail end of a massive experiment that's gone on since 1971 with the dollar, especially. And the world is going through a revolution of the monetary systems, not just the United States dollar, but worldwide. And the average people don't know it because we've got normalcy bias. But the train's left the station. There's literally, I mean, it's happening. It's happening faster than I had anticipated. It's actually surprising me, because I've talked about it for years, and I'm, telling people about the Great Reset, in 2019. On my radio show, and saying this is, they're about to reset the system. Well, 2020 rolls around, and what is that? They got the lockdowns, and you've got the lockstep, the Rockefeller plan. You've got all the medical tyranny, and then massive currency creation, which I think in the United States, a lot of people after that the word inflation starts running into the normal dialect of everyday people. They're like, wait a minute, I can't buy the same amount of groceries or gas or clothes that I could 2 years ago. What the hell happened? I thought I'm told to save dollars. That's already a losing game. It's, if you're saving dollars, you're, Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, said if your savers are losers. Well, you're losing not because you're not smart. It's because the thing that you're saving devalues itself. By its very nature, it's fake. They just make more of the currency unit. So there's it's like one of those Russian dolls, where there's a conspiracy inside a conspiracy inside a conspiracy when it comes to the world of finance.
So the idea of just creating currency as well, I suppose that hammers home the idea that this is used just as a control system. If it can just be invented and then devalued to keep people down. Now, I've often wondered about the lockdowns and stuff. There was a huge transfer of wealth through the lockdowns, through COVID. Have you any theories about what that was being used for? Like why that wealth needed to be moved?
Well, there was something interesting that I noticed at the last quarter of 2019, and that was the Central Bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve. They made $6 trillion in new currency units, propping up these markets that are called the repos. It's the overnight markets where they're needing liquidity to clear financial transactions because there were shortages. So they made $6 trillion in new, and I would go on, InfoWars and my friend David Knight's show and talk about this. And I'm like, hey, they're creating the GDP of nations like South Korea in 1 month out of thin air, and they're, what is this, that they're doing? You also had in the end of 2019, it was the largest exodus of CEOs in history. So that unprecedented amount of CEOs of multinational corporations resigning and taking their golden parachutes. So on the horizon, they knew something was about to happen. And if you look at, basically, they need an excuse to create this unprecedented, you talk about a wealth transfer, that's exactly what it was, but it's almost like they're running out the clock. They know that the fiat, which fiat is a Latin word, means by decree. So a fiat currency means, hey, here's a currency and we say so. It has value because we decree it. It doesn't actually have any value, and they know that. That's why the game is always to get regular people to chase the green pieces of paper, and the super elite or those in the know will buy assets. The rich don't hoard cash. It's not what they do. They don't, unless you're a dictator or run a drug cartel. You don't have pallets of $100 bills like Saddam Hussein. You have assets, you have real estate, you have equity, you have gold, you have things that have intrinsic value in and of themselves. And so you stay away from the cash business. Well, the cash starts to devalue. So I think in the simplest terms I can make it, I think they needed an excuse to do massive liquidity injections and then also not let it get too hot. So they have people locked down. So you can't have people spending too much or going too much. That's why as soon as they couldn't keep the lockdowns anymore, that's when you had all this inflation kick in, because people were, I'm going out and buying things again. And then all of a sudden it takes more and more to buy less and less. And because these trillions and trillions and trillions of new currency units were put into circulation, like one of the metrics I look at is there's 52 times more currency on Earth today than when I was born. So I was born in the tail end of 1979, and the debt of the U.S. was right at $1 trillion when I was born, a little under actually, right under $1 trillion. But now so it took us from the founding of the United States to 1979 to go $1 trillion in debt. And now we do $1 trillion in debt every 90 days. So the acceleration rate is unprecedented. It's the mathematics are so overwhelming. I think that they're prepping for again, it's no secret, they call it a great reset. And, they're prepping themselves, the insiders and everything else, for this currency monetary reset. A lot of us aren't privileged to know exactly what they're doing, but I think you see the writing on the wall with the price of gold, the price of Bitcoin, things that are also like antithetical to the fiat system. And we haven't even begun to see resets of commodity prices yet. I mean, it's not even the opening round. I mean, this is like a test model. The damage is so extensive to the financial system that, if people knew, like Henry Ford said, if people understood the banking system, there'd be a revolution in the morning. But the more that you dig into it, the criminality of it is so vast that the only way really to understand it is their own language. And the language that they use is a great reset. And that's what they're doing. So underlying all of the lockdowns and everything else in the currency creation is buying themselves time to reset currencies. And there's so much that goes along with that, gentlemen. Like, the United States used to have the petrodollar. So from 1974 to last year, we had this deal with the Saudis and OPEC that they would only denominate crude oil in dollars. And that was what helped prop the dollar up after Nixon took us off the gold standard. We literally just lost the petrodollar. We just gave it away. We didn't fight for it or try to renew the deal. So you have to ask yourself, why did they allow that? Well, they allow that because it's a controlled demolition, in my opinion.
What was that done under the guise of? Because surely there must have been a reason for it. Did they use focusing on renewables instead of petrochemical stuff? Is that what it was put down to?
Yeah, there was Jared Bernstein was a guy that was Joe Biden's economic advisor, and he'd written articles in the New York Times about how the United States should lose the world's reserve currency status. It's actually not good for us. We need to have autonomy in and of itself over. Well, that's a stupid argument, at least in the short run, because the reason that the dollar is able to do what it does is because people use it. one of the first things that I saw I was a soldier in Iraq. I was part of the tail end of the invasion. That was my third war. And the first thing they sent us to do was they sent us to the bank. And people were running out of the bank with these Iraqi dinar that had Saddam Hussein's face on it, but nobody wanted them. So they had these boxes full of their own currency. I watched the currency die in real time.
Wow.
I was 23 years old, and I was watching everybody run out, and nobody wanted to accept them, but they would accept U.S. dollars everywhere. I bought like a cold Pepsi off a kid. That was my favorite entrepreneur of all time was a little Kurdish kid that ran around selling stuff when things were on fire. And you talk about people like, it's not the right time for me to start a business. I'm going, holy hell, man. I saw a little Kurdish boy, and I was like, wow, he's selling me a cold. I don't know where he got it, but I drank it. I bought it with U.S. dollars because nobody wanted those boxes of Iraqi dinar. And that was my first real lesson in paper money. And that's how I started thinking about that later, about thinking about the paper currency. But they took U.S. dollars, but here's the thing. They don't take U.S. dollars anymore. It's illegal to trade dollars in Iraq because they joined part of the blowback of our strategy there is they're more aligned with Iran than they ever were, and the Irans are aligned with the BRICS nations. Mm-hmm. And the dollar system was weaponized, and we bullied people. We have 40 different sanctions on 36 different countries with the dollar. So they want a whole new system. So the reason that we've been got away with so much fiscal irresponsibility and this, spending money and not to, gosh, I don't want to disparage drunken sailors because at least they run out of money. They can't print new money, but we print new money to continue to be slobs with it and run the military-industrial complex and these welfare warfare state things. So and when I was a kid, growing up in the 80s and 90s, that was a big thing. Like you had to talk about fiscal responsibility and balancing the budget, and the U.S. debt was a topic in politics. Not anymore. Nobody talks about it because it's so vast.
Yeah, it's like the distances when you talk about distances in space, isn't it? It's completely unfathomable when you start talking about numbers that big.
Yeah, I mean, if you could, there's not enough paper in the world, literally, but if you could take and create $1 trillion $1 bills and stretch them end to end. And if you believe in the metrics of how far the sun is away from us, it would stretch 93 million miles.
That's insane.
So how do you pay that back? A trillion seconds in time is 32,000 years. So 1 trillion seconds in time, because a billion seconds is 32 years ago. So 1,000 billion. So 32,000 years ago in time is 1 trillion seconds. So these are numbers that are just so large and the metrics are so off the chart. You can't get away with that forever. It's unsustainable. We have 130, we're about 127% of debt to GDP of gross domestic product to our debt. There is a number that most economists will agree upon, but when you hit 130% of debt to GDP, you start to have an economic unraveling. So the underlying metrics and the fundamentals for economic pain are all there, and they know that, but the average person doesn't. And even me, I study this every single day. I don't know exactly. People ask me, somebody asked me this weekend, well, if I put 10,000 in gold, what kind of return can I expect in a week? And I said, nothing. I don't know what kind of return you could get in a week. You're going to watch. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he was disappointed. Like, well, if I put 10,000, I'm like, it doesn't work that way. I don't know. There might be a sell-off. There might be this, but I just know that if you had, if you bought 10 ounces of gold in the year 2002, when I started buying gold, like before I went to Iraq, it was $300 an ounce. And now it's $3,500 an ounce. And gold didn't really go up in value. That's the magic trick. An ounce of gold buys the same amount of land and crude oil and groceries and things that it did 100 years ago. All right. So you have to measure them by commodities, but people look at the number go up. It takes more dollars. Well, why does it take more dollars? It's not, did somebody just discover that gold's valuable? No, it's just that the dollar starts to wane as more big entities. If you look at who's buying gold, right? That's another thing. Yeah, some everyday people are buying gold, and then you get up the ladder. It's like the big multinationals, the central banks. They're not buying their own stocks. They don't have hoards of their own currency. It's so funny. They don't sit there and have vaults full of dollars. They buy gold bars. They don't follow their own system. They tell you, and by the way, in the United States, we have a campaign for savings. It's called Feed the Pig. You can look this up. And I always thought, that's really weird. Like they tell people like, save this thing, feed the pig, feed the pig. I'm like, oh, I think I'm starting, because like a piggy bank, but that's the way they're going.
Piggy banks.
But that's not the way I look at that phrase, It's just really interesting. I mean, that's it. If you peel back, all the stuff with the finance, then you get to see the politics of it, because our politics they're not real. I mean, the fights that the two parties have in the United States really aren't, because they agree on the fundamentals of what really are screwing us over. The continuation of the welfare warfare state. That's the bipartisan. They love that. It's the little minutia, to throw out to their bases, what they care about. But at the end of the day, they march that right down continue down that path. But so our politics really aren't real, because you look at the same people finance the same parties. Like they fund both. It's like in the 20th century you had the Soviet Union versus the United States, funded by the same people.
So, do you think with the current administration in the US, is that a continuation of the plan to lead towards a central digital currency?
Yes, just in a different way. They did a really terrible job with central bank digital currency. I mean, they just screwed. By the way, just because they have a printing press and they went to all the same schools and these Ivy League elite people, that doesn't mean that they're super smart. Okay. It just doesn't. Their predecessors were, their ancestors were pretty damn smart. I mean, Machiavellian evil. But they're phoning it in a lot now. They take stuff too far. They put out the wrong puppets. I mean, they're just not really good at this anymore. Started getting really sloppy around 9/11. It's kind of sloppy. The passports found in the rubble, things like that. Building 7.
Building 7. Don't get me started on Building 7. I was showing my dad that, and he's like, I don't understand. It's like, Dad, that building just collapsed
into its own footprint. Not hit by.
And our main news channel, the BBC, reported it.
Yes. Before it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't make that shit up.
Well, they did. I mean, they made it up, and so there's something. And what's funny is, the truth eventually, and even like shows like Tucker Carlson with Senator Ron Johnson's coming out, and they're talking about it. So let's see. I think those are bright spots, but at the end of the day, they've gotten really sloppy, and I think they really tried to sell central bank digital currency in a way that had a big backfire. So I think they're probably going to go along with it, because that's really ultimately technocracy, guys. Okay, that's what that is the technocracy, which is a political movement from the 1930s. Elon Musk's grandfather was kicked out of Canada for trying to create one, and H.G. Wells wrote that book, Things to Come. They made a movie out of it in the 1930s. And it was about a technocratic elite stopping all the wars, basically controlling humanity's destiny through some top-down tyrannical system of like aristocratic, learned elites. It's just another version of like Plato's Republic or something, but with technology.
I'm glad you brought up Elon Musk. I did not know that about his grandfather. Because he's getting out of Doge now, is that right? Because we're seeing this in the UK today, that he's kind of like they're saying he's pulling out of Doge. What do you think to what he's doing there? Because it looks to us from the UK like we need something like that in the UK to see, to find out where all our money's going.
Well, it's highly unfortunate but I'd love to see more transparency, and I think that my view on politics or people that get involved in the political realm is when you do something good, I want to give you a thumbs up. And when you do something that's anti-liberty and freedom or non-transparency, I'm going to oppose you. I think where we get our minds get really turned in the wrong direction, our spirits are in the wrong direction, is when we become partisan. That means that whatever somebody does is good, or whatever somebody does is bad. And I think that's when our brains shut down. Partisanship is where ideas go to die, because people are like, oh, I support Trump, so everything he does is great. When that's not true, so stop doing that. When he does something wrong, oppose him. When he does something right, if you like it, But same thing if somebody on a political spectrum that I didn't normally agree with does something great, I think that I want to give him a thumbs up. I think that's good if it supports people. What I thought he did initially with Doge was really great. And I like when bureaucrats get angry. I like when people, like we have this bloated Leviathan that doesn't serve liberty or human dignity or freedom. I want to know where the money goes. Let's audit the Pentagon. Let's audit the IRS. Let's audit everybody. I think there ought to be transparency across the gamut. And it was short-lived because he obviously made somebody very angry. And the politics of it is like, hey, you're messing with, it's a lot of things about the two-party system. And I ran for Congress. I was very good friends with the last World War II veteran who served in Congress. And I learned a lot about, he was friends with, all the old players like, Lyndon Johnson and John Connolly and all these guys. Like, John Connolly was riding in the car when Kennedy was murdered by the deep state. I used to ask him all kinds of questions about people that he knew. And, he would not deny, things like Lyndon Johnson taking votes from dead people, stuff like that. He knew that those guys did that. I mean, it's people in the know, but you get into the minutia of politics and it's, they don't want their touching their pork barrel spending and all the little things that go along with their district or whatever. So transparency is really hard. But you have to do, if you wanted to save civilization, you'd have to have some sort of, there has to be some accounting. And they just did not, it was not popular. They lost the momentum. It seems to me something happened with Doge because he had these young guys showing up and plugging in the computers and running the data, from what I understand. And it was like a big thing, like right as soon as the inauguration, as soon as it was noon, they had people like plugging in stuff and running numbers. And then now it's all in a thing of the past. And we're literally just in June. It's from January to June. And, it just was not popular with the ruling. It's popular with the people, but they're, again, we're just, it's hard to know exactly what's real. So I thought it was a good thing when they started that, but I don't know, where he goes from there. I mean, you have to wonder, like, is it bad for if he's not getting enough support, can he continue it with his business, with Tesla and stock prices and public image and everything else? Was it just, and by the way, all those that you guys got to know this, that backlash was funded by intelligence or something, right?
You talk about auditing there. Do you think they will audit Fort Knox and look for the gold?
No.
Do you think it's there?
Well, the United States has supposedly about a little 8,000 tons of gold is what it's supposed to have. But it's a really interesting story. It had 16,000 tons right close to the end of World War II. We had 50% of the world's wealth and 5% of the world's population at the end of World War II. Wow. And there's this weird thing about 8,000 of it. So we had to cut it in half. Somehow mysteriously got put on paper contracts owed to the Federal Reserve. So there's a question mark hanging over every bit of our gold and how much gold we have. I honestly think through my studies and what I've seen is that China actually has more gold than we do at this point. People perceive the United States as having the lion's share, but I would dispute that. I would say that there's evidence to show that the Chinese actually have closer to 16,000 tons, and that's between the political party that rules it, the Communist Party, and the corporations that have ties to them. So they're a net inflow of gold. They have 60,000 gold mines in China. And Robert Kiyosaki, who told the story, he wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, and one of the people I look to for, he's one of the mentors I look to, and I read a lot of his books since I was a kid. He found a great gold mine, had raised money for it in China. They were about to renew the lease so they could send down the drills, and the Chinese government just didn't renew the lease, and they took it. So like he'd found it, did all the legwork, raised the money, and they keep the gold. And that's why, the Belt and Road Initiative for, throughout Africa, minerals, it's a race for rare earth minerals. It's a race for commodities. That's what this whole reset's about. And China, certainly, I think, they're setting China up to be, if you look at the timeline, if you wanted to derail the United States from being a superpower, you'd start in 1971, you take us off the gold standard, okay? And in 1972, they opened China to the United States. It was like this, we didn't even have diplomatic relations with China. Because of Chiang Kai-shek and the Cold War, like we supported the Chinese nationalists, and Mao Zedong in 1949 took over China with the help of the Rockefellers and the Rothschild banking houses, a lot like the Bolsheviks got control of Russia in 1917 with the world's richest people. So you had this timeline of 1971, then 72, opening China. But most importantly, I think, in that timeline is 1973. And that's the formation of the Trilateral Commission, Zbigniew Brzezinski and the Rockefellers and their ilk, which they wanted a technocracy. And they wanted to have an Asian-centered, because they believed that the technology should move eastward. Based off of culture, I believe that it would be a lot more able to implement their new system. So the Trilateralists and the Council on Foreign Relations, these other entities that basically run our government, were transferring through things like free trade. You talked about this transfer of wealth. So yeah, COVID 1984 was the largest transfer of wealth in human history. But before that, the largest transfer of wealth in human history was free trade policies. And that's where the United States was just like gutted, and they pawned America's soul and sent our manufacturing and our technology eastward, or through the global south, and places like that through NAFTA. That was done on purpose to gut us and turn us into a consumer nation as opposed to a productive nation. That's the two different economics of what makes a powerful nation. Nations in history rise on sound money and economic nationalism, and they die on free trade and fiat currency.
So it's a very similar thing to what's happened over like just my lifetime in the UK with shutting manufacturing and stuff like that down. But I've always had this thought, especially like during COVID and things like that. It became more apparent to me that in order to enact, like you say, some sort of technocratic society, the US has to fall, because even though, like, let's say for instance the Europe doesn't have something like and England doesn't have something like the American Bill of Rights. I've always thought of that Bill of Rights being a shield over the West, because you can only push totalitarianism so far in Europe when they're looking across the pond and go, well, over there looks fine. Like we can't go too far over here, because the guys over there in that the big rock keep talking about freedom, and that's kind of why I think there is such an attack on the US right now to get rid of that, because you can't have a new world order while America stands the way it does.
Yeah, I think very parasitically they attach to our body politic and what made us strong, and they just siphon that off. Again, it begins with the control of the money supply, and then the control of the economic policy. It makes no sense. Like, it makes no, like, if you look at post 9/11 world, like, it's like if you say the official story is true, and we have 19 hijackers who just found a copy of the Constitution in a cave in Afghanistan and went berserk because they hate us for our freedom. Like, oh my God, I can't believe these people have free speech. We got to fly planes into buildings, which is
learn to fly on Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Yeah, yeah. We'll learn how to do what no pilot says can be done. Landing Cessnas in Florida, or not even landing, taking off and not landing. Well, let's say that's true. Then we decide that we're going to rotate our military into oblivion and no-win democracy wars, spending trillions of dollars while our own infrastructure crumbles. Meanwhile, strategically, we lose all these footholds, and you look at the South China Sea and other places, like the big picture, trade routes, big power stuff like that. No previous generation of American leaders, no matter how, nefarious you think they are, like, they would have never done that. It makes no sense. Well, it only makes sense if you want to just have this jamboree kind of party, like it's like it's the last days in the Fuhrer bunker or something, like they're all upstairs, like not giving a shit. Well, I think this is what it was. It's like, hey, let's just throw a bunch of stuff out there, and we'll create that. We'll just enrich some people, and it's looting the treasury really through the guise of let's fight the terror. If we don't do that, if we don't invade a country that didn't attack us, that didn't want war with us, to strip it of weapons it did not have, the terrorists win. And that's the sad part about all of that. It makes no sense unless you think, oh, they're doing this on purpose. Like, they're wrecking our military, wrecking our culture, wrecking our financial system. It's like, if a fly lands on your head, do you kill it with a hatchet? That's what the global war on terror looks like. It's just like, well, why didn't, why? So that's if you believe the story too, right? So even stupid on top of it, because that didn't even happen. Like, we can get into the nuts and bolts on who Tim Osman is and what Al Qaeda means. I mean, I was there at I was a part of the first army company on the ground in Afghanistan after 9/11. I mean, people ask me, so when you were there, your first in, was it 2002, 3? I'm like, 1. So I was the last bit of 2001. I got to see a lot of the intel gathering and stuff that was going on in Kandahar, and at the time, it was a crazy time.
And did you get to see any giants?
I made some friends. We correspond, and some of the giants, the Kandahar giant and I are friends on Facebook, I think. No, I would have.
Every so often you take him a goat.
Yeah, I was just like, hey, look at this guy. No, I would have loved to have seen that. Kandahar is a real beautiful place. The Afghanistan was, and some parts of it is kind of like Mad Max, Road Warrior scenery, but it definitely has its charms. And I missed out on taking a selfie with the giant, although I think that's a cool story. And I've heard from of after the fact, but while I was there, I never heard anything like that.
Do you come across and it's going to sound like a weird question, this, but listening to some of the financial stuff and hearing things on wars, the number 33 pops up all over the place when it comes to these elites. Do you know much about that?
Well, yeah, you look at they use that. I think one of my opinions on World War I, for example, the Armistice Day was the 11th of November. So it was the 11th day of the 11th month, the 11th hour. So it's 33.
Yeah.
And of course, that's weird because in the United States, that's Veterans Day. It was then November 11th. And then it's also General George S. Patton's birthday. It's kind of weird but they used that. I think in my opinion, it was a ritual to close up a portal Like it was opened up with the Archduke Ferdinand being murdered, by the Serbian Black Hand, which is like an anarchist group that was funded by and had ties to British intelligence, and the House of Rothschild. Like they started this stuff, and it's no accident. Like one of the keystones I think that they needed to kick off World War I, which, by the way, I mean, you can't find anyone to say, why was that a war? Why did civilization need to be defiled? Why did millions of people need to die? For what? They really can't. I mean, even the World War II people that are like, well, it was the good war, which is funny because, a lot of people, you guys are in Britain, so it's like England declared war on Germany, not the other way around. It's like that was in September of 1939. It was Neville Chamberlain's government declared war on Germany because
trust me, everybody in England's forgotten about that.
Well, they called Chamberlain the appeaser, and I'm like, but he's the one that declared war. I mean, because the whole thing is that Poland had a war guarantee, right? So they didn't negotiate with the German government, with the Autobahn and returning the port of Danzig and all the stuff that they wanted to have returned, which is German speaking, all that stuff. I mean, I'm not making a case for the Third Reich or anything. I'm just saying that's what was happening. But the Poles were like, oh, we have a war guarantee. So, Hitler invades Poland because there's no negotiations or anything. And he was really shocked that there was a declaration of war. But I bring that up because we start this war, this so-called good war, World War II, 50 million people died. So we could go to war for Poland. And at the end of all the bloodletting and everything else, we gave Poland to Stalin, which is even worse. It's like, so what was that for again? Like when you tell me about, oh, we got to do this for democracy and all this other stuff. Those are code words to me for something completely different, which is ritualistic. And I think that, no, it's the same thing. World War I was a ritual. I think that the Middle Eastern wars and Babylon, I took part in that. I mean, I was a young soldier. I think that there's something to that with those who control, because it makes no sense. Like, why did you need to invade Iraq? I mean, it can't attack you. It can't project power. It can't do anything. It's this broken nation that we flew 40,000 sorties over Iraq. A sortie is just a flyover, we and this is during the time of the no-fly zone. We kept a no-fly zone in Iraq, and they couldn't bring up an aircraft. So for 10 years, we did a no-fly zone and embargoes, flew 40,000 sorties. They couldn't shoot down one aircraft. And they did. They tried, by the way, and they shot at our aircraft. They flew 40,000 sorties over Iraq. No aircraft was shot down, but he's the new Hitler. He's going to take over the United States.
When you were in Iraq, when did you start thinking like this? Because that must have been something to wrestle with.
Oh, it was bad. I started thinking before we left for Iraq. I had some real problems with that war. I didn't have the historical sense that I do now, but I was just coming off the heels of ending my tour in Afghanistan. It was back to back, and just had a real gut level, just had a real problem with it. I remember we drove 800 miles from Kuwait up to northern Iraq. So we were just driving through, we were the tail end of the invasion. So like Mosul officially fell the day I drove into it. Officially, the Iraqi Republican Guard leaving their barracks.
Good work on you there.
I mean, it wasn't me. I mean, obviously, I was just very, very fortunate. I mean, you didn't have to do the heavy fighting with like real, organized military. After that, it's just guerrilla warfare and people that we funded through intelligence, for chaos reasons and things like that. But it was real unfortunate. And I remember driving when we crossed the border from Kuwait into Iraq. I turned to my driver and I said, I just got this. I mean, it was in my solar plexus. And I remember I looked at him. I said, this is a really, really bad idea. really, really, really bad. And it just stuck with me the whole time. I am so for, I mean, with my grandmother praying for me and people around me watching my back is the reason I'm able to talk to you today. I mean, I lost my temper and my discipline so many times because I hated it there. And there was so much beauty too. Like I was where the ancient city of Nineveh, well, the ruins of it, and I got to see Nimrod's palace and other things, and some of the oldest churches in Christendom that are no longer there after the Israeli and CIA-backed entity known as ISIS blew it all up. It really sad. I don't know how you can be proud of that. It's awful. I mean, it's just so sad. And the neocons, which are basically Satan's little helpers. In the United States, we have the Republican Party, and they're full of neocons, they're Trotskyites. I mean, they believe in the philosophy of Leon Trotsky for perpetual revolution, and that's a true intellectual root, by the way. So they're Marxists, which is bizarre because evangelical Christians love them. It's so weird. It's so weird because I know that it's so weird when you know what you're looking at and the other people kind of don't. It's like, and you're trying to convince them that you're actually promoting Satanism. They don't understand what you just said, but it was so evil. And
it almost seems like they try to, they're destroying the past so that when we, like you mentioned World War One, but it's almost like our children will one day just not know about the past because there's no evidence of it. So
true.
It's like they did a reset back then, and they're doing little resets all the time.
And there may have been, I mean, if you really, and I thought this on a gut level, I thought that, and this was me at 24. So, 21 years ago, I remember thinking, I wonder if we invaded Iraq to get some of the relics.
Well, there's been stories, hasn't there? There's been lots of stories about that.
I thought about that, guys, while I was there. And I'm not taking credit for people thinking, and later, I mean, there's been some scholarship on that, what happened. But I thought there has to be some other explanation of the, and maybe it's partly like, hey, we can waste a lot of money, and we can also, honestly, I mean, if I'm being honest, and it probably smacks people the wrong way, but I think that a lot of our foreign policy is a ritual to kill off people that are really good. And I'm talking about like patriotic young men and women who would fight for the country from middle America, from all different backgrounds and races that believe in something. You put them out there and then you get them killed for something that has nothing to do with American security. Somehow I think that's satisfying to a lizard person.
It's spitting in the face of God, isn't it? If you take someone that's...
Take something beautiful, that somebody that would defend, like if there's a lot of evil that goes on in the world. Like you look at, I mean, to be able to, like as a warrior, if you can hunt those who hunt others, that's fun, right? Like I think that's good. Like I think people. I'm anti-war. I'm very anti-war, and I'm a peaceful person. But you can't really. Peace is not a virtue unless you can also create violence. Mm-hmm. And I think like on the border of the U.S., like there's some horrible, awful, evil people that traffic human beings and children and do things in across the border back and forth, and they're militarized. I'm like, why don't we kill those guys? Yeah, I mean that too. But we never kill those kind of people. We never take on, like, it's why doesn't the FBI raid the mob or the Hell's Angels? Like, why do they always like hit some like Roger Stone's house? Like they don't. It's like they don't. There's nothing. They don't take on anything that would actually. They don't really do that, and so it's that's a marker to me. Like, something is inherently wrong with what we use force for. And I'm not against force in all things. I just think we misuse it. So I think our foreign policy is ritualistic. I've been on record for saying, I'm not afraid to say it. I think it doesn't win me any friends. I don't think I can run for office now, but because you have to support the war, and I'm not going to support something that is doesn't promote the security and freedom of the United States.
Well, like when you talk about rituals as well. See, this is something I've always not struggled with. It's always seemed quite obvious to me that
reptilians rule the world.
Kind of, regardless of how ridiculous it sounds. Like people aren't very patient. Like we don't live a huge amount of time. We don't have and even in amongst the amount of time we have a very short window of time where we're even effective as people. Yet these plans seem to extend human lifespans. And that, to me, especially when you deal with the people that we're dealing with here, who are very greedy, who want these things tomorrow, the idea of doing things over long periods of time has always led me to believe that there's some sort of like ritual element and something just like spiritual, like at the end of it.
I just believe that. I mean, there's not. Yeah, I just believe that that's true. I think that there's circumstantial evidence for sure to point to that. Mm-hmm. And then you look into the secret society element of it. Not all secret societies, but I think the elite have their own religion. You got a 50-foot owl in Bohemian Grove representing Moloch. And the voice by Walter Cronkite. I mean, it's kind of weird, right? I mean, I think they have their own faith that is Luciferian, Promethean. They think that they have information that you don't. Maybe they do. But they look at it as the snake in the garden was the good guy. Yeah. And God is a tyrant or something that should control you, and you should have, it's the Illuminati way. Which, by the way, the birthday of the Illuminati and the celebration of communism worldwide are the same day.
That's insane. I heard you say that in a different podcast I listened to last week. Yeah, I had no idea about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I look at and go, oh, come on. That's, of course it is, Do
you see a day? Sorry, Lee.
Sorry,
you're going to say.
Go on, you're right.
I was just going to say, do you see a day? God forbid it happens, where we're trading in things like water, maybe oxygen at this point. I don't know. But
do I think water becomes a commodity?
Yeah.
Yes. And that's really stupid because the Earth's 80% water. Mm-hmm. It's just only like, we can't figure it out. It's like, you can figure. I think it's so ridiculous. Of course, you just you don't have a water problem. You have a salt problem.
But you see that happening.
But I do see that happen. Because it's something that you need. And so and we've done so you have all these fake environmentalists, because by the way, I'm a conservationist. I think there should be clean air, clean water, clean soil, all the things. I don't think that multinational corporations should be dumping poison into the water supply or the soil, or being able to just do what they want. I mean, but these idiots and I literally think they're just idiots in the green movement. They talk about abstract stuff. They're like, we got to stop you from driving your car. I'm like, why don't we get the trash out of the ocean? But they never do that. Like, you never hear them, like the same people that will support, let's just go green and there needs to be electric everything, or just stop using firewood. Like, they'll say stuff like that. Those same people don't want to do anything about illegal immigration of massive amounts of people. There's an ecological disaster in the Southwest United States of trash and human waste and everything that they don't care. That's to them, because that flows. It's just stopping you from cooling or heating your house or having a gas stove in New York. What does that have to do with the fact that we have, by the way, who's the biggest polluters? It's the military. You don't ever talk about that. Like, we talk about, we got to save the planet, but here's some new missiles for Ukraine.
I believe the carbon footprint on the missiles is low, though.
Right. It's just it's such an insult to an intelligent person, because by the way, when I was little too, I remember this. Remember, they used to be about planting trees. Mm-hmm. You don't even hear that anymore. Nobody wants to plant trees or clean up the water. It's just like, we just got to make sure that you can't move anywhere.
That's such a good point. I remember that, like planting and I've got 2 little boys. They haven't planted a tree yet, and they're definitely at the age of planting a tree.
Yeah. But that used to be a thing. I remember there was that famous commercial in the 70s of the Indian crying, because somebody threw trash on the side of the road. But you don't see that anymore. They don't talk about anything that actually helps. They just talk about making sure that we got to shut you down. We have to make sure that there's no progress.
Yeah, well, environmentalism used to be about stopping big companies dumping waste where they shouldn't be dumping waste. It was about litter in the ocean. It was about worrying about oil spills. And that's all been taken away. The stuff that would tangibly make like the world a better place for people has been removed for promoting what I think are like harmful and useless technologies.
That's right. And then you have to step away. It's only so much space you have in your head, right, for dealing with these people or dealing with these political movements or blah, 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 and trying to argue with them. Just do your best to communicate the truth. And then, I mean, if I'm leaving you with anything on the financial stuff, we're inside that. I mean, we're inside that experiment that is at the tail end of fiat, and start looking into where the monetary systems go after this. I mean, we're not out of the woods for CBDC. It'll just be called something else. They'll use stable coins to do something. The technocratic control is certainly there, but they're saving themselves. They obviously think that there's value in the yellow metal that we get from the earth. They think that there is, because there is. It's just part of human nature. You cannot get away from it. It's just what it is, and there's value there. It's fun. All the gold in the world before Columbus set foot in the Americas in 1492, all the gold in the known world in Europe and in Asia and the Middle East could fit in a 6 by 6 foot cube.
Wow.
And then after the discovery of the Americas, gold exploded everywhere because of the massive amounts that the Aztec and the Mayan and the Inca had, in South America and Mexico. And that created the modern age. It created the Industrial Revolution because of the stable currencies. Stable currencies and the ability to trade created the modern world and the Industrial Revolution. And then now they've hijacked that and they give you fake. Well, what does fake bring? Well, fake brings fake wars, fake politicians, fake news with real consequences. And that's where we are. And that's why it's so insidious, because they've hijacked it's not perfect. But if you have a system where there has to be accountability for the money, then you have a more responsible government. There's a chance for liberty. There's a chance for freedom. But if you can just print things out of thin air and buy off people and support things that never should be supported and oppose things that shouldn't be opposed, then, you have what we have now, which is, I can't, guys, I can't imagine having Boris Johnson like that.
Well,
we might get him again.
I mean, we got it pretty bad here, but I remember watching him, like just his face, like everything I see, and he's just this disheveled. It's so bad to watch,
I think the guy that we have right now is worse, and that's worse? Saying something.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. I mean, but we do it all over the place. I mean, we just had Biden here in the U.S. and people. It's funny. The first time I'd see people like that weren't really political go, who's running the country? Who's minding the store?
I was just going to say there must have been like a positive out of that, because in the same way that, like we said, we've mentioned COVID-19 a load tonight, in the same way that COVID-19 woke a load of people up, I can imagine having a husk of a man wandering around pretending to be in charge of like the world's biggest superpower. Might have made some people ask some questions that wouldn't normally have asked questions.
It's like they're not even trying. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they are. Maybe this is part of it. Maybe that's the humiliation of it. But it definitely isn't we're not in Kansas anymore, ladies and gents.
Just before, when you talk about it being like the last days of fiat currency, what does the end look like?
Well, I think, to put it simply, the dollar's not going to zero, it's going to digital. And I think that's the rest of the world wants to reprice commodities. That's what BRICS is: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. It's about 40% or more of the world's population. They have a massive amount and share of the GDP and wealth of the world already, and they're gaining members every day, it seems like. The world wants to reprice commodities because they want to reprice their own currencies. And I think there will be some sort of agreed unifying thing. And it may be cross-border payments that are associated with gold. Because I'd said this on Tinfoil Hat back in December. I think gold is already the world's reserve currency again. And this happened in 2021. The Bank of International Settlements made gold a tier 1 asset instead of a tier 3 asset. So tier 1s are currencies. And so after that, gold supplanted, it started moving up the ladder, and it surpassed the euro as what's held most by central banks and holdings. And so the number one is the dollar, but it's waning. So mathematically, I think gold is pretty much already there. It's the countries start trading in gold. They just need payment systems that are faster and deliverable. And like the Shanghai Gold Exchange, they're building like satellite warehouses across the world now, so they can deal in gold contracts. So I think gold supplants, and maybe a combination of things, even like Bitcoin or stable coins. But we're moving into a digital era, but combined with commodity repricing structure.
How do we? Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, how do we accept like new forms of digital currency while avoiding the central bank digital currencies?
The only way to do that is to support decentralization, which I think history trends in that right now. And like if you have the ability to hold physical gold and silver on your person, then you're outside of the system to the best of your knowledge. I mean, if you're going to trade with people, gold and silver. I like Bitcoin for reasons of that too. If you're trading of your own wallet, now it's on a transparent blockchain. It's not that private to have Bitcoin, but you can't stop it. It's like if I want to send you guys right now, I want to send you $100 in Bitcoin. Just show me your wallet. I don't have to go through a bank. I don't have to go through the mail. I don't have to send you cash. I don't have to send you anything. As long as that decentralized system exists, then we got a shot at staying, having our freedom intact or having our ability to trade and privacy intact. And gold and silver offers that. There's just a lot of still have to work on the ground game, as far as opposing central bank digital currencies. That's why I don't want people to relax on it and say, oh, well, we got such and such an office now that it's gone. I'm like, it's not. It'll come in a different form. Maybe we got a different timeline now because they did such a terrible job at the rollout, but with central bank digital currency. But I think we just continue to work on decentralization and supporting movements that are about decentralizing and supporting the ability to trade in real money. That's gold and silver, in my opinion.
And how do our audience get in touch with you then, Tony, to invest in Wise Wolf Gold and Silver? And I know you do the digital stuff as well.
Yeah, I have a Bitcoin company. I've been in Bitcoin since 2016. I only deal in Bitcoin. And if you have Bitcoin and you want to turn it into gold and silver, we're the only broker in America that does it for no fee. I don't punish you.
I heard that. That's unreal, that.
Yeah, we do that because I also have a Bitcoin company, and it's fine. I'm still going to make okay. I just thought that was a great way for me to differentiate myself from some of the big players. They can't do that, by the way. Their models won't let them. I can because I'm more nimble. So no fee on Bitcoin when you use it to buy gold and silver, and we have a subscription service for precious metals called Wolfpack. And you can find you can go to my website is just do tony.gold. Just go to tony.gold and it'll take you to different links for Wise Wolf and Wise Wolf Bitcoin. And you can look that up too. Like the subscription model is Wolfpack. It's Wolfpack Gold. So we got about close to like 1,400 people across the U.S. that just buy from us automatically. And I think we're just getting started too. It's fun. You know, it started $50 and then it goes all the way up to 5,000, and everything in between. So that's a great way to stack some metals, and we really do our best to get you the best value and selection and all that stuff without you having to do anything. You just select the price, and then my staff, I've got, you know, people in Texas, people in Missouri, and we just do the best we can and get you the best deal. So.
And you've got a podcast as well, if you want to plug that.
Yeah, I've got a couple. Working on a new one. I might have to send you guys a link whenever I'm working on a newsletter one that'll be weekly for metals. It'd be like geopolitics, you know, monetary system, gold to silver and Bitcoin, stuff like that. Just highlights on what's happening in that realm. But I do a show on parapolitics, and it's called Arterburn Radio Transmission. You can find that on Thursdays. Anywhere podcasts are found, and you find my Twitter or whatever it is now, X, at Tony Arterburn. You can find me there. And my show Paratruther that I do with my good friend Mr. Anderson. We did some dives into hidden history and things like that.
I'll make sure to put the link to your website in the description if people want to go and find the stuff you do.
I'd appreciate that.
So if you wouldn't mind hanging on for a little bit, I'll hit the video here to play us out. But thanks for coming on, Tony. That's been really interesting.
Absolute
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Why are you a conspiracy theorist? And I said, why isn't everybody a goddamn conspiracy theorist?
This is the real research. Literally have an alien base, and they are literally communicating.
I don't have a whole lot of time.
Have you personally had any experience with interdimensional beings?
What we're thinking of as aliens, they have infiltrated a lot of aspects of military establishment. And they are not what they claim to be.
We leave you much that is undone.
That's one small step for man.
There are great ideas undiscovered.
Visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars.
Remove one of truth's protective layers.
There's a monolith.
They want the major population centers wiped out.
Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
One diaphragm for mankind.
Because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened.
Those challenges are yours.
We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
There are places to go beyond belief. Beyond belief.